Hello, my name is Kate Caldwell. I'm the Director of Sponsored Programs at the University of Detroit Mercy. This presentation is part one in a three-part series on developing a budget for a grant proposal. Part one will focus specifically on budgeting personnel, which will usually be the largest item in your budget. Where do I start? Start with the grant proposal guidelines from the sponsor. If the agency or foundation has specific rules with regard to the budget, those will be outlined in the guidelines. Also, if the agency has specific forms, those will be included in the grant application package. For federal grants, all costs must be allowable according to the OMB circulars, unless the guidance grants an exception. For instance, the circulars disallow funding alcoholic beverages, but the NIH has sometimes granted exceptions for research projects studying the effects of alcohol on certain populations. If you are unsure whether an expense is allowable, ask me or Rochelle Smith in the budget office. It's our job to know the circulars, and we'll be able to tell you. Resources you will need. You will need the agency budget forms, our internal budget forms for review, which can be found on our website, udmercy.edu/academicaffairs/OSPRA. Also, a lot of questions you might have, such as what our tax ID number is, what our DUNS number is, how much the university will reimburse for mileage, will be on the UDM fact sheet, which is also on the OSPRA website. A quick overview of the types of costs that are usually included in grant proposals. Often your largest costs will be personnel, salaries and wages, which is what this webinar focuses on. Also, equipment and permanent property, travel, other direct costs such as materials and supplies, publication, tuition for students, consultants, subcontracts, other costs, and indirect costs. Regarding salaries and wages, first you have to decide which UDM faculty and staff will be working on the project. You will probably want to budget some time for yourself, your co-PI or co-PIs, other personnel dedicated specifically to the project, such as a lab manager or someone you need to hire for the project, like a registered nurse or something like that, graduate students, undergraduate students, and postdocs if you have any. For how much time? When thinking about how much time you're going to spend on the project, consider your regular workload. A faculty member with a regular 9-month appointment teaches 3 classes per term with 1 release for unsponsored research and service. A typical term, therefore, looks like this. Class number 1, 25%. Class number 2, 25%. Class number 3, 25%. Service, unsponsored research, other, 25% for a total of 100. This is rough. Therefore, in your grant proposal, the first thing you want to consider is whether you'll be spending a whole 25% of your time on the project during an academic term. If yes, write 12.5% of your annual salary into the grant. Then you will also want to consult with your dean and make sure that it's feasible for you to have the course release, that they can hire a replacement to teach the course. Also of note is the fact that the federal government will not pay overload, so please don't write in overload on your on-term for a federal grant proposal. Also, in subsequent years, remember to raise your salary 3% every fiscal year. Our budget sheet will do a lot of the calculations. For example, let's say Professor A earned $75,000 per year. You would add that on worksheet A of our internal budget form. Our form asks for the number of person months rather than for the percentage of effort. If you wanted to calculate 1 course release per year, that's 25% for 1 term or 12.5% for the year, you can easily calculate that So 1 course release is about 1.125 person months during an on-term semester. The sheet will calculate that automatically. If you go to the budget summary, you will see that it adds it to the on term. It also adds our full-time fringe rate of 34%. for a total, and it calculates our indirect costs, 51.3% of salaries and wages. So the total amount for the course release, including fringe benefits and indirect costs, is $17,372. However, sometimes the sponsor will limit the amount of indirect costs we can ask for. For instance, HRSA limits indirects to 8% of modified total direct costs, which, as you can see, would be much less. Say one of your co-PIs, Professor B, is not going to spend that much time on the project. They will only spend 10% for one term or 5% for the year. Not enough for a course release, this will be salary recovery for the university. With regard to your off-term months, you can ask to get paid. You are eligible for a stipend not in excess of base salary divided by the period to which the base salary relates. What that means is 1 month of your summer salary is going to equal the same as 1 month of your on-term salary. So you just take your annual salary divided by 9, and that's your monthly salary. The sheet will calculate that as well, and it will also calculate our off-term fringe rate of 8.5%. Many agencies limit summer salary recovery to 2 months, so before you write in more than this, please check the agency guidelines. For other personnel, say someone you're hiring specifically for this project, you want to use industry standard rates. Also, at the time that you apply for the grant, you will want to get the Human Resources Department a job description, and you'll want to write a cover letter saying it's a grant-funded position contingent on funding, but this way it'll be approved, because sometimes it takes kind of a long time to get new jobs approved, so you want to have that so that the minute you get the grant funding, you can hire that person. If you want to add another professional, they would go under Part B, Other Personnel. If you need to hire a registered nurse for 3/4 time at $45,000 per year, that's where this would go. This will also calculate fringes and indirect costs. Student research assistants. If you plan to write in tuition, you can look up the current tuition rates for your college or school. So if you plan to hire a graduate student you're in the College of Health Professions, if you're in nursing, $825 per credit hour. Say this person we want to go full-time, and it will calculate that person's tuition on the form. Also stipends. Usually if it's a grant proposal for a stipend, they will tell you how much they want you to pay. Those stipends, the primary purpose is a learning experience for the student. They're being paid to go to school. They're not being paid for work. Or you can write students in for an hourly rate, the primary purpose of which is to pay for work, likely to be more task-oriented work like a lab assistant or a research assistant. We don't have any strict policies on how much to pay students per hour. Financial aid has guidelines. If you want to include one undergraduate student for $10 per hour for 20 hours a week for 40 weeks, this totals $8,000 and can be added under the undergraduate student line. This will calculate indirect costs, but no fringe benefits. And that is how you budget people in your grant proposal budget. If you have any questions, here's my contact information, my phone number and my email address. Also, Rochelle Smith in the budget office can be a great resource. If you receive the grant funding, she is the one that's going to be managing your funds and post-award, so she's a good person to know. And that's it. Please join us for part 2 for the other costs and grant budgeting.